Hello and welcome to my video. Today we're going to be looking at how to change the cam belt on this 2010 Volkswagen Golf with a 1.6 TDI CAYC engine. So here we have the kit from Dayco. It consists of the belt itself. You've got a new tensioner and 3 idler pulleys. We have a replacement water pump from Mealy. The fasteners are also part of the Dayco kit to replace any of the stretch bolts fitted on the tensioners and pulleys. We have a new aux belt. It's also been requested that we change the header tank. The one on the car has become quite misty and stained. We have some replacement coolant. We also have a service kit there, which we will look at later. First things first, we need to remove the engine cover, which just comes off with a tug. Held in by these 4 clips. 2, 3, 4. Put that to one side. We also need to look at removing the header tank, the fuel filter, and this TPF control valve. Disconnect these electrical connectors by pushing back that clip, pushing the actual electric socket in, removing the clip, and then pulling it back. So now we will remove the fuel filter. There are 3 10mm fasteners holding it in, which we will release, so we can just move it over there somewhere in order to give us the space that we need. The expansion bottle is held in with 2 25 screws. Again, we will just move it over there just to give us the space we need. And the DPF valve is a spline drive size 10, which is quite commonly used on Volkswagens. We'll release those 2 in order to move that out of our way as well. I've actually decided I'm going to disconnect a couple of the fuel lines in order just to move the fuel filter further over to give us a clearer view of what we're doing. These clips just push together, some pliers, allow you to pull the pipe away off of the filter. One's slightly longer than the other one. I tend to find which orientation they go back together in. Put that up there out of the way. Allow us to move the filter over there, so you're keeping it upright, stop any fuel from spilling out. Okay, and that gives us a much clearer area to access the cam belt. So first steps, we can take the cover off. We can release 1 clip, 2 clips. There's a 3rd just underneath near the engine vent. There you go. That should allow us to remove the cover, exposing the cam belt. So now we've got access to the top of the engine, we now need to get access to the bottom right hand side of the engine by removing the driver's side front wheel and the tray underneath the car. So now we have the car up in the air, we have to remove the fastener securing the under tray to the vehicle. As you can see, we have some torque 25s, 1, 2, 3, 4 per side, and some torque 30s towards the back of the tray, and obviously the same on the other side, and that tray will come down. We also need to remove this lower wheel arch trim. Again, I think there's 4 torque 25s holding that in. So now we've got access to the bottom of the engine, we need to remove the auxiliary belt and the auxiliary pulley. So we need a 16mm spanner, put it on the auxiliary belt tensioner, release the tension from the belt, and you can just pop it off, like so. In order to remove the lower pulley, I first need to hold the pulley still using a 90mm multi-spline socket. And holding the engine still, I need to crack off each bolt. So now we need to support the engine. As you can see, I've used a block and a bottle jack. Back up to the top again, we now need to remove the engine mount. So we have 2 10mm which are securing this coolant pipe to the engine mount, which we have to remove. We'll separate the engine mount here with these 18mm fasteners, and then we will remove it from the engine block itself with, I think it's 2 or 3 16mm fasteners, and these fasteners here to take the engine mount completely out of the way to give us complete access to the cam belt. So now we've finally got that engine mount out of the way, you can clearly see we've got good access now down the side of the engine to access and change the cam belt. We just need to remove that final plastic cover there, which as you can see has got a torque 30 fastener at the top there, and 4 more down the bottom. So before we remove the old timing belt, we need to set the timing. Now I can see here that the crankshaft is actually in the correct position. The timing marks do line up perfectly, as does the fuel pump. Just seeing there, it's just lining up with that hole, which we will pin later. But what I have noticed is that the crankshaft sorry, the camshaft is 180 degrees out, which means the crank needs another revolution, because the crank does 2 revolutions to every 1 revolution of the camshaft. So we need to rotate that 360 in order for the camshaft to be rotated 180 degrees. So in order to get the engine in the correct position, I'm going to use this lever bar with a 19mm socket and rotate the engine clockwise until it's in the correct position. As you can see, we now have our lower timing pin in place. So that locks into a hole just above the gear there, and that stops it from rotating. So that's in exactly the right position now. Going up to the top, I've noticed the fuel pump is not quite where it needs to be. It's very close. So what we need to do is release these spline fasteners here in order to just rotate the fuel pump slightly in order to get it into the correct location. So it's probably due to the belt stretching over time, and obviously the timing changing ever so slightly. Same goes for the camshaft. So as you can see, it's all timed up now. We have the pin in the camshaft there, and we have the pin in the fuel pump. We've obviously still got the pin locking the crankshaft at the bottom, so we can now release the old cam belt using a 15mm spanner to release the tensioner just here. And that is the old cam belt removed. Okay, so now we need to remove the old idler pulleys. This one down here using the 13mm spanner, this one here the 13mm, the tensioner is a 15mm, and this idler pulley has a 16mm. We also need to remove the water pump, which is 3 10mm. So now we've removed the water pump and the tensioner pulleys. We also need to remove these 2 studs, which are to be replaced, which are in the new kit, due to them being stretch bolts and one-time use. So the easiest way I find to do this is to just use 2 nuts, one on after another, 2 13mm spanners, tighten them against each other so they grip the stud, and then with the spanner on the back nut, just give it a little tweak to loosen the stud from the engine block. So I'm now ready to install the new studs. I've checked the spec and the torque is 15 Newton meters for the stud itself. So the torques for the pulleys are different again. I use the same method as I did previously, tightening the nuts onto the studs to allow me to torque them down. So now we've got the studs fitted, we can install the new water pump along with the new idler pulleys. Now that the pulleys are installed, we can move on and fit the cam belt. To have the cam belt in the correct position, you can then apply the torque to the tensioner, torque up the idler pulleys, the fuel pump and the camshaft. This is a useful illustration taken from the workshop manual, which gives you all the torque settings you require, the belt configuration, how to set the tensioner, and also where all the timing pins go. Okay, so now we've got everything refitted and timed up. I'm going to remove the timing pins. I'm going to do a couple of revolutions of the engine just to ensure everything remains tight, the tensioner remains in position, and after 2 revolutions our timing marks should still line up. Okay, so after 2 revolutions of the crankshaft, you can see the tensioner is still in the correct position, and also our timing marks have come back in line to where they need be. I'm able to fit the pin into the camshaft, confirming everything is where it needs to be. Now we can look at putting some covers back on. So now we can fit the lower cover back on and reinstall the engine mount in reverse order to how it was removed. We can now move on and reinstall the fuel filter housing and the coolant expansion nozzle. We now have to reinstall the lower auxiliary pulley, torque the fasteners and reinstall the auxiliary belt. We can now fill the engine with coolant, get the engine running and get the coolant to the correct level. Now that everything's working as it should and the coolant level is set, we can reinstall the DPF sensor and start to put the engine covers back on the driver's side wheel and lower the car from the jacks. And that concludes the fitting of the cam belt. Thanks for watching.